Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening science seminar series put on by UAF Northwest Campus in Nome and also UAF Alaska Sea Grant. You're in the home office tonight. Both Alaska Sea Grant and Northwest Campus, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region, and we serve the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Yupik, Inupiaq, and St. Lawrence Island Yupik peoples. Tonight, we have Commander Altendorf. He is the Arctic Emergency Specialist, which if you've been in the Arctic anytime lately, he's a busy man, I'm sure. And he is the Arctic Emergency Specialist for District 17, U.S. Coast Guard Sector Anchorage. So everything west and north of Anchorage. So that is awesome because we are all in his region. And tonight's talk, he's going to talk about some of the new, give us an overview about oil spill response and also talk about some of the new technologies that would be deployed in the awful event that we had a situation. The Bering Strait region being no stranger to oil spills, we are all interested in this topic. So, and what you can throw at it and help us with. So with that, take it away, Commander Altendorf.
All right, thank you, Gay. I really appreciate everybody joining me today. So I know some of you can't see me, but I'm gonna go through the slide deck, but I wanted this to be kind of an informal introduction to what I do in the state and how we do oil spill planning in a resource constrained environment in places that are difficult to get to, and when you get there can be expensive and challenging from a logistics perspective, and how we are working our way around that to really maximize our efficiencies and utilize folks already in the region and try to double down on our ability to get more data, which I know Gay will probably agree with me, is not only incredibly difficult to get data, but to manage it, analyze it, and disseminate it. So these are all things that challenge us in the government and our partners in that. So, but real quick, I feel like I should say a little bit about me. I hit 20 years in the U.S. Coast Guard this year, which is just shockingly difficult to believe. But I spent most of my, well, I've spent all my career in environmental response at the federal level. So I've done oil and chemical spill planning and response and investigation and enforcement since I was a young pup who got his first job out of college at the Environmental Protection Agency in Region 7 in Kansas City, Missouri, and then joined the Coast Guard shortly after 9/11, and then have been bouncing back and forth between the coasts in San Diego, San Francisco Bay, Hampton Roads, Virginia, Philadelphia, DC, spent a lot of time in the DC area. So when in 2017, I was offered a 4-month tour, at Sector Anchorage to help with oil spill exercise planning. And of course, that was in 2017. That 4 months turned into 5 months, and then it turned into a year contract, and they've been bringing me back every year. Which has been great because I absolutely, after spending 10 years in DC, wasn't sure I was going to love Alaska, and man, it's really grown on me. And now I'm a resident and love it here. Don't intend on leaving, and love working for Captain Lusk, who is the sector commander. So that's a little bit about me. A very, very rough kind of background, but my life is spent doing this kind of work for the federal government. And I really want to give everybody a background on that. So let's see, make sure I can advance the slides. Perfect. So I'm going to spend the first few minutes of this slide deck really talking about why it is the Coast Guard does what it does and how it does it around oil spill planning. And I think it's important for folks that aren't familiar with that maybe are more familiar with the disaster response aspect, which is a local level led effort for local response. And then if locals need help, they call the state. If state needs help, they call the feds, and the feds being FEMA. Now, we work with FEMA all the time, but on oil and chemical spills, It is a very federal top-down system. And so we, Coast Guard, EPA, and the state, Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, have on-scene coordinators that enforce environmental law. And the basis of environmental law in the United States is making the polluter pay. So we follow the regulated community and ensure that if they're making money off of using oil or moving chemicals or transporting something, that they keep the oil and chemicals where they're supposed to be and not, discharged uncontrolled into the environment, or released uncontrolled into the environment. So that's what we do. And so I'm just going to go through real quick, kind of talk about our authorities. This is the super dry part of the talk, but it really does provide a solid background as to why we do what we do and what authorities we use to do this kind of oil spill planning. So all of the oil and chemical spill response for the United States generally emanates from the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which amended the Clean Water Act, and Superfund, or the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liabilities Act. So these two statutes are federal laws that have a number of regulations associated with them. The primary regulation that requires the Coast Guard and EPA to work with states to do environmental response preparedness, planning, and prevention is 40 CFR 300, or the National Hazardous Substances and Oil Pollution Contingency Plan, or the NCP. The NCP sets up the National Response System. The National Response System is led by federal and state on-scene coordinators. These federal and state on-scene coordinators manage spill response and represent the government and the people of the United States to ensure that the polluter, or whoever's the responsible party, is paying for and responding to and cleaning up their mess safely and to at least pre-existing spill conditions, or as much as possible. So that's what the Coast Guard does at spill response, but we have this whole preparedness element that we're going to talk about today, and that's the basis for the presentation. Is the federal on-scene coordinator and the state on-scene coordinators for the state of Alaska co-chair what's called the Area Committee. More specifically, the Arctic and Western Alaska Area Committee, which is what I'll talk about here in a second. Okay, so just to boil this down, the National Contingency Plan provides federal and state on-scene coordinators incredibly broad authority to respond in conservative favor of protecting human health, welfare, and the environment. Now, there are key factors or metrics we use to determine whether or not we have authority to respond to a spill. Our on-scene coordinators and the staff of folks that work for the on-scene coordinator. So for Sector Anchorage, Captain Lusk, the sector commander, is the federal on-scene coordinator, and she has a staff of folks, me being one of them, that advise her on spill response, preparedness, response, and enforcement. Okay, so again, super dry parts of the presentation, but again, laying out the system that we work under. And so this is a fancy graph that just shows that this all goes all the way up to the Beltway or to DC. So, but specific to Alaska, all of the secretary or the departments of the United States, the federal government, have a representative on the Alaska Regional Response Team that represents the resources at a regional basis, the region being the state of Alaska. And so that's the center ring. And then the OSCs that you see off to the left and to the right represent the area committees. And so in Alaska, there are 4 area committees: Arctic and Western Alaska, which covers most of the coastline of the state; Prince William Sound, which is MSU, run by MSU Valdez in Valdez; and then Southeast Alaska, which is out of Juneau and covers Southeast Alaska. EPA manages an area committee for everything not coastline. So EPA and Coast Guard work in conjunction, and Coast Guard on-scene coordinators have jurisdiction 1,000 yards in from the highest tide. So 1,000 yards in from the highest measured tide is where the EPA Coast Guard, rough jurisdiction line is for spill response authority. And it really is very much a guideline for us. We work with EPA every day. and we coordinate spill response of any kind on that boundary. Okay, so this slide represents the plans. There are plans at every level. So industry that moves oil and benefits from chemicals or chemical processing or transportation, they're required by regulation to have a plan to tell them as a corporation or entity what to do in case of a spill or a discharge or release. And those plans are supposed to hook in with local emergency planning committees. And they're supposed to, all those industry plans and local plans connect into the area contingency plan, which is the federal and state oil spill response plan that state and federal on-scene coordinators work with, use to respond to a spill. So industry plans report and connect to this area plan, which is a government managed plan by the state and the federal government here in Alaska. And then there's the Alaska Regional Contingency Plan that is managed by the Alaska Regional Response Team. And then there's the NCP, which is managed by the National Response Team, which is cabinet level folks inside the Beltway at headquarters. So lots of plans that are all designed to force the regulated community and the government that regulates that regulated community to work together to respond to spills. Okay, so
Can I ask just a quick question? This
Sure.
is Gay. On that previous slide with the layers, so where would, since we have Gamble on the phone, where would Gamble, if they wanted to help plan and have a voice on in this system, would they be under local emergency planning committees?
No, I would recommend that they, if they are interested in helping us build out the plan for oil spill response, then the area contingency plan or the area committee. And I will provide information on the website, and I can also give you numbers to contact for an email to put folks on an email list so they know when the area committee is meeting and how they might involve themselves if they have the time.
All right, thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Gay. Great question. Okay. These slides are not necessarily important. They're kind of repetitive and it's way more detailed than we need here. But again, I'm just want to be clear. There's a bunch of industry plans that are required by folks that move a lot of oil. And there's all these kinds of metrics for whether or not you're an offshore facility or you're a vessel or you're an onshore facility that's close to the water. So all of those industry plans all are supposed to point back to the relevant area committee. And that area committee, again, is co-chaired by the state and federal on-scene coordinator. And those on-scene coordinators have a lot of authority to ensure that the responsible party pays for a cleanup. Now, if there's a spill or discharge from somebody, either say, since I'm talking to folks in the Bering Strait, if there's an international incident where we don't have control over spills that come from vessels that don't come into US ports, then we have the ability to use government funds to clean up spills. But we have, again, certain metrics that are required for us to meet before we can access those funds. Okay, this is a quick look at the area plan. We just released for public comment this year's area contingency plan for the Arctic and Western Alaska. Again, the website I will give you later at the end of this presentation has all that information on it. But we not only want people to participate in the area committee to help us build a better plan and to be involved with stakeholders and other government officials to meet the captain of the port, but we also want folks to help us make this plan better. So as I said before, the area committee is co-chaired by the state and the EP and the Coast Guard for Arctic and Western Alaska. And we really, really work hard on this plan, and we take lessons learned identified in responses and exercises, industry exercises, and bring them and put them back into the plan. So we try to, it's an iterative process where we're trying to make the plan better every year. Each agency has plan review requirements. The Coast Guard's requirements are the most onerous or the highest. And it's largely because we, as an organization, transfer folks out every 3 years. So we move people all across the country. And so 2 years from now, you might have a different responder that's never been to Alaska. And so we want the plan to be relevant and updated and not and organized in a way where anybody from a country can know that here's the area plan, look to a certain section and know what to do and get that information specific to the state of Alaska and responding. And so the Coast Guard's sets the bar, and all the other agencies we work with have agreed to meet that bar. This slide just goes into shows the iterative process about how we make modifications and update the plan yearly or annually. And anybody can make suggested edits to the plan, but the planners for the federal and state on-sea coordinators are the ones that kind of like decide what goes in. And we do a lot of work around trying to make the plan very user-friendly, but also if people have other guidance documents and things like that that are valuable, then we reference them in the plan and then have them on have those actual documents on a separate web page. We call references and tools. So the area contingency plan isn't the end all be all. We look to other like documents and other technical documents and guidelines and checklists, and NOAA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they print out these beautiful documents that help us be better spill responders. And so we reference those things in the plan and by pointing them to a separate website. So it's a fairly modern system we're trying to build here that's, again, iterative. Real quick, we test the plan. Industry is required to, if they meet certain thresholds, to test the plan, their own industry response plan. And as part of testing that industry response plan, they have to point to the area plan, and then you work together with the government to affect a positive response, so people practice how to do this in case the real thing happens. So each agency, Coast Guard, EPA, DEC, we all work with industry in the state, the major industry players, and on their exercises. So we integrate in the spill response incident management team, but we also regulate, and as well as the state, regulate industry's requirement to test their plans. So that's part of how we learn. State of Alaska's got very specific and actually very good spill response exercise guidance out there. So for those, like, again, the big oil company players out there, they have guidance on how they manage spill response. And so, and it doesn't have to be the folks on the slope. So in like Crowley and the other fuel delivery companies in the state, if they've got above ground storage or they're moving it by barge, they have to meet certain exercise requirements. And we work with all the companies to ensure that their employees and their staff know what to do in case there's a response. And part of that is because we test them under the environmental laws. So I like to call, a lot of people will ask why there's 4 different area committees. And a lot of that has to just do with the way the federal and state government is organized itself. So it's born from, who's got the most experience and the most standing, if you will, legal standing to affect a response to an incident. And so we have these 4 area committees, but we all work together. And EPA, Coast Guard, and DEC, whether we're in Juneau or Anchorage or Valdez, or wherever we're at or wherever we're deployed to, Nome region or wherever, we're all talking to each other, and we all do joint planning, even though we don't have joint plans. So if you open up the MSU Valdez plan, it's not going to look exactly the same as the sector Anchorage, Arctic, and Western Alaska area plan, but but that's okay, because we want to build this plan to our unique area. And that's an important thing to know, that, no matter where we're at, all of these agencies, again, Coast Guard, EPA, and ADEC are working together doing joint planning, even though we don't have joint plans. Another thing I like to bring up is that we've learned a lot from all of the spills the big spills since, and these are 4 of the lessons learned documents that came out of the last, say, 25 years of large spills. New Carissa in Oregon, the Athos one outside of Philly, Costco Busan in San Francisco Bay, and Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf. Honestly, if you were to look through all of these unique documents, they largely say the same things. Communication is always a challenge. Not enough people were at the area committee meetings. The government didn't do well enough in ensuring that the industry was ready to respond. And so we really do take seriously all the lessons learned here, and we've tried to again, in an iterative process, build them back in the area plan. And what I'm going to and what the technical innovation that we're doing when it comes to geographic response strategies, again, is the meat and potatoes of my presentation today, which I'm going to get to shortly, I promise. But I can't talk about that unless I tell you about why it is how we're organized. This is just a quick slide about the Arctic and Western Alaska Area Committee itself. We have, well, again, one federal chair, which is the Captain Lusk, the sector commander for Sector Anchorage, who manages all of the Western Alaska and the Arctic, including the Aleutians. And then the two, actually 3 now, Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, SOSC. So I need to update the slide, but there's 3 on-scene coordinators for the state that cover the Aleutians, the northern region, and central region, which includes Prince William Sound. Mission statement, vision statement, not important. What is important is that we have the Arctic and Western Alaska Area Committee. We have a standing area committee, and then we have 5 subcommittees where all the work gets done. So what I like to say is to Captain Lusk, who I absolutely love working for. She's an amazing leader and has been great the last couple of years, which with the pandemic have been challenging. But she's too busy to do the detail work. And so she's hired people like myself and our emergency management division chief and some other young junior officers who are excited to work in the environmental field. And they help staff these various subcommittees. And these subcommittees do a lot of the work on behalf of the federal and state on-scene coordinators. So the subcommittee I'm going to spend time on tonight is the GRS subcommittee, which is the Geographic Response Strategy Subcommittee, and its whole purpose is to manage geographic response strategies. I will explain what a geographic response strategy is in just a minute, so bear with me here. But this is the construct of the area committee. It has 5 subcommittees, and those subcommittees could have work groups. For example, the Regulator and Coordination Advisory Subcommittee just took on the issue of intentional wellhead ignition, which is a super interesting, very technical, like plan of a thing that requires a lot of technical expertise, but also something that we have not talked about at all in our area plan. So industry asked us to take that on, and we developed a government-only work group. We got a bunch of experts in, and then we built out intentional wellhead ignition portion in our latest version of our plan. So that's what a work group does, and it can really churn on some of this very sciencey. Is that what I was going to say? Some of these very technical, science-oriented issues related to oil spill response and preventing oil spill response, which is really what intentional wellhead ignition is all about. Okay. What else do you need to know about area committees? Area committees reflect available resourcing in a given area, and it leverages joint planning. So we go out and have conversations like this and try to get as many folks who are interested in spill response to help us out. We are required to meet certain thresholds for planning, interacting with the public and industry, and to deal with certain topics. So some formatting and some things we talk about in the plan are non-negotiable. They have to be there by law, but the content may differ area to area, and that's not bad at all. And I won't go, there's a lot of reasons the area committees exist, but really it's about having conversations with the folks that are going to be most impacted if there's ever a spill. So people have met the stakeholders and other government officials and tribal governments, and we try to get everybody together with government and industry participation. So everybody feels a certain amount of comfort that there are people doing this work. People are talking about this. Crowley and Vitus and all these other fuel delivery companies and Hillcorp and ConocoPhillips, they all have environmental responders and planners and as a regulated entity, they have to work with EPA, Coast Guard, and DEC to really practice and prepare for spills. And that happens all across the state. Real quick, just for folks, before I go on to what a GRS is, I just want to let you know what happens when there's a spill report. So if so the federal threshold for oil spill reporting is sheen. So a sheen, sludge, or discoloration at the surface or subsurface of the water. If anybody sees a sheen, or if you're a fishing captain or you're a fishing vessel owner and you create a sheen, you're required by law to report that spill. And so that report comes into the National Response Center, which is a special like phone bank of folks the Coast Guard runs in DC. And then that National Response Center pushes out reports to both state and federal agencies about the spill. And so then Captain Lusk's federal on-scene coordinator representatives, they evaluate each spill report and decide if federal assistance is required, or if the regulated entity needs to be monitored, or there's no RP and federal and state responders need to assist locals in ensuring that there's an effective response. So all that happens pretty quickly on a daily basis. And if there is an incident, then we form up what's called a unified command. And that unified command has an on-scene coordinator, a state on-scene coordinator, and a responsible party if there is one. We also add local and tribal on-scene coordinators if there is one, or if there's interest, or if those organizations or governments can provide resourcing. Okay, so Arctic and Western Alaska covers the what is that, peach, salmon colored area and all that coastline, again, from roughly the Canadian border on the slope from Kaktovik all the way around the state, on the Aleutians and the South Central. And then Prince William Sound Area Committee is managed by MSU Valdez, which is a subunit of Sector Anchorage. So Captain Lusk technically, that is MSU Valdez, a subordinate unit to her. So she does have a leadership position there. And then Southeast, Sector Southeast, which is Sector Juneau out of Juneau, Alaska. So those are the three area committees the Coast Guard runs. And then the inland portion is what EPA runs. Okay, I think I've talked enough about this stuff. All right, so this last slide is I have to give kudos to Department of Environmental Conservation's Spill Prevention and Response Division. Their SPAR folks that work with us daily have made an incredible website. And I really encourage folks to go to this website for more information. Actually, the full version of this talk is on this website on the background information section. But all the area committee meetings and the subcommittee meetings are posted here. We have FAQs about spill response. We have all kinds of great stuff on this website. So the state does a great job, and I really encourage folks to go check it out. Okay. So let's talk about GRSs. So I think I should be able to transition over if this works.
Looks good.
Okay.
Geographic response strategy.
Yep.
Validation and visualization.
But I was on the wrong slide. So there we go. All right. So
Okay.
Here's where we're at. Tech innovation. So let's talk about tech innovation and geographic response strategies. So first question, right? What is, after me talking this whole time now, I still haven't told you what a GRS is. A geographic response strategy are oil spill plans, response plans that are tailored for a specific area. And so if there's a spill, say from, Teller's fuel farm, there are spill response strategies tailored to that area where we could pull boom or set up a diversion area to try to protect a bay or strait or whatever water body or something on the land. So or be able to move oil into a specific collection point where we could easily skim that oil off the water and recover it. So really, it's a first responder tool. So if we were to have a spill reported from Nome or in the port of Nome, we could pull these GRSs out for that specific area and tell responders to go, enact this GRS here or there that would protect, again, sensitive environments, animals, haul outs, what have you. Any kind of special environmental condition that we would want to protect post spill, we would hand out these GRSs. So that's what a geographic response strategy is. So a typical sector in the Coast Guard, one of the previous sectors I was at was Sector Delaware Bay, which is in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, very interesting city, truly enjoyed my time there. But it's a lot smaller in area than Arctic and Western Alaska. And so they have 100, 150 GRSs, and most of them you can drive to over bridges, waterways, coastlines. I mean, they're very accessible, and the state and federal government and even locals go around and help, make the GRSs better and update them. That is not what's happening in the state, and largely not due to want, rather the ability, expense, cost, and logistics of doing that kind of update to what we have is over 800 GRSs in our area alone. So these GRSs were largely drafted in 2003, the ones that we manage, and they were done by scientists and experts and responders, but in a room. And so they took out charts and maps, and they just kind of divined, based on their experience, if there was a spill in a certain place, what would be the best response strategy for that specific area. Well, they've never been validated. And in actuality, and I think I've got a slide on this, less than 1% of the GRSs in the state have been validated. Again, not because we don't want to, but because this is really, really hard and very expensive. And so the whole purpose of this talk today is just so we can explain to you like what we're doing about that and how we're trying to get past that using technology. Okay, so GRSs in Alaska are organized by geographic zone. So in Arctic and Western Alaska, there are, I should know this off the top of my head, but the number just left my brain. 7, I think, geographic zones. There's 10 in the state. Arctic and Western Alaska has 7. Pretty sure it's 7. And so you can see on this slide that all the different regions, all the different geographic zones where there's GRSs, and it's a lot. There's a lot. So we have challenges. So Coast Guard policy requires annual validation of GRSs. Again, a lot of units can. We struggle to, if we're being honest. Less than 1% have been validated since 2004. And when I say validated, I mean looked at again, and then visually looked at through either, satellite imagery or some other imagery, or they've actually been tested. Like if one GRS says we're going to pull 1,000 feet of boom over this creek or mouth, over this creek post spill, then we're going to practice that and see if it works. And for instance, when we did that on the Aleutians a couple years ago, somebody had, one GRS said, hey, we need to put 1,500 feet of boom across this stretch of water. And what the GRS didn't say was that there was a 5 or 6 knot current running through there. So no amount of boom is going to stay put in that kind of current. And so those are the kinds of things that haven't been validated, and why this is a challenge for us. The other thing, these GRSs exist on, and I pulled this. This is a cut from ADEC's website, which is awesome, by the way. But the GRSs themselves are live as PDFs, so they're not digital. It's a 100% analog system. They're all there on the. So if you were to do Alaska DEC oil spill GRS, a Google search, you get right to their website and you could find all these. But you'll quickly realize it's an analog way of moving through the state for these kinds of resources. And we all know modern technology, we're really beyond that. We really need to modernize GRSs and GRS management, which is, again, what we're talking about here. So we struggle to manage updates and validating these GRSs. And we know the coastline of Alaska, especially in the Bering Strait, changes. And it could change year to year. And so it's important for us. I don't know that we can get across all 800 in 1 year, but we certainly can do better than less than 1%. And so that's what we're trying to get to. So let me take a sip of my tea here. There are two concurrent efforts, and I'm going to talk about both of these right now. So one of them is transitioning GRSs from an analog existence to a digital existence. And you all have heard of the geographic information systems out there, but a GIS layer of sorts is what we really want to get to. We want to make these digital so that they're accessible by as many people as possible. And Coast Guard is mandated to use NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's GIS system called IRMA, which is the Environmental Response Management something. Oh, they're going to be mad at me that I forgot that. Anyway, IRMA is the GIS system that Coast Guard's required to use because that's what NOAA uses, and Coast Guard's not a science agency at all. We are a regulating agency and a response agency, but our science is mostly managed by our NOAA scientific support coordinators. And so we want to transition all these GRSs and all the PDF data that's there on those PDFs, not only the imagery, but also the language around describing the response strategies to this digital home. And then the other thing we're doing, this other concurrent effort, is using drones or uncrewed aerial systems to validate drone or coastline to get a better visualization of the coastline to ensure that the GRS that we created in 2004 is going to still be applicable for the coastline of 2022. And I'll show you some examples in and around Nome where you can see like the imagery we pulled from 2004 and the imagery from that same location in 2022 is different. And it's challenging for responders and for the efficacy of geographic response strategies. So those are the two things we're doing: digitizing the GRSs and using drones to validate the efficacy of GRSs. So how are we doing with that? And I'll get into both of these and show you examples, so it won't be a mystery. We're training field personnel. We created this GRS subcommittee, and they're building an approval process. So, if we ask the community or local responders or volunteer organizations to take a look or visualize GRS efficacy, we still need to take that data, analyze it for accuracy, make sure it meets our requirements, and then make sure the on-scene coordinators know that we want to make this update. So there's an approval process here because GRSs are government mandated and government managed tools for responders. And again, I'm sure Gay understands this better than anyone. Data management is everything. And so I'm challenged every day by the data we collected post Typhoon Merbach, and the Coast Guard is really challenged by bringing data collected from the field in and storing it and analyzing it and then reproducing it and visualizing it and disseminating it. And that, what I just said, requires a great deal of tech and effort, and the Coast Guard simply doesn't have it. So we had to find a way to, if we're going to digitize the GRSs, find a way to find someone to archive them and analyze them on our behalf. So those are the things we're doing. So we have, and when this slide really just talks about where we want to go and the challenges we're having right now. Right now, there is a very draft layer in Arctic Irma for GISs, and it's not modern, it's not updated, and so we're working on that. We are really looking for a full digitization of the GRSs by the end of 2022. If I'm being honest, we're probably going to go into 2023 a little bit, just because I guess I can't underline the point, the amount of effort it takes to look at all of these data points and geo-reference them. And it just was really challenging to digitize all that data and then making that all relational in a database that can be read by a geographic information system and visualized for an end user. It is a tremendous amount of work, very honorable work that absolutely needs to get done. But we vastly underestimated the time it would take. So this slide originally said July this summer, and we're already pushing it into next year. Okay, so I want to get to, so that's what I just talked about was digitizing process. What I really think is super interesting is the drone aspect of this. But I just thought of something. ADC GRS oil spill. I wanted to show everyone. I don't think I didn't think to do this, but I'm going to do it right now to show you what a GRS actually even looks like.
Is it possible to pull one up for the Bering Strait region?
Yes, actually, I have examples for the Bering Strait region. Absolutely.
Okay.
But this is just real quick, all the data. We've got pictures overhead, lots of information in a one-page GRS. And this is the kind of thing we need to digitize. And I'm just letting you know it was difficult. It is difficult. So I'm going to go back to this area, like you said. Yeah, let's see. Yep, there we go. So it is the green southern zone. There we go. So why don't we look at all these? So I just have to.
I saw if you went back one, there's the St. Lawrence Island.
Would you like me to pull that one up?
That would be wonderful. We have a caller who is on St. Lawrence Island listening, so it would be of extra interest, I think. Thank you.
Awesome.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Did I
think you go back one more.
Okay.
Did you send an email?
I did, Orlin. I did send an email.
Okay.
Is it, you had a couple, there was Yahoo and Hotmail and one other. I sent it to Hotmail.
Yep, Hotmail.
Okay.
At Hotmail.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
I'm going to open up the Northwest Cape Gamble GRS for us to look at real quick, so people can see what that is. So yeah, this is Northwest Cape Gamble, and again, what we see here is some free oil skimmers out here. If there was a spill, where would we put diversion booming? So we could divert oil spilled into a natural collection point. That's a big piece to these GRSs. And then we have some, again, some, aerial imagery clearly from a plane. You can kind of see the reflection in the windows, and then all of the data that goes along with the deflection booming, which includes some geolocated points, a description of the response strategy, how it's implemented, the equipment you would need to do it, and the special considerations. Are there vessels in the area? Are there endangered species or threatened species in the area? What kind of habitat is there? What human use is? Clearly, this is all subsistence use, a region. So yeah, a lot of data here that exists only as a PDF, and we want to really get that into, bring it into the modern era, and so that's what I'm going to transition to, is how we're doing that using drones. So, Gay, how much time do I have?
You have all the time you need. We don't cut you off.
Okay,
You're
all
getting
right.
to the good part. It sounds
I am
like.
getting to the good part finally.
I'm learning a lot, though. It's good.
Okay, so geographic response strategy validation and visualization. So how are we using data tools to support Arctic operators and responders? And it's really the name of the game here as we get into this part of it. So again, modernizing GRSs, digitizing them, getting them in an accessible system where we can manage them better and update them on the fly using local resources that maximize efficiencies and minimize cost and logistics. So the other piece to that is using drones to give us that visualization. And so I'm going to go quickly through this presentation that was created by Dr. Guerin with UAF. She's our partner in this. And her at the International Arctic Research Center, I have to give her credit for this slide deck, but we've used her several times to assist us in developing the procedures, because as we respond more and more and we do this, we envision having, because the Coast Guard has got a drone program, ADEC has a drone program. So what we're looking to do is build a set of checklists and standard operating procedures about how people could do GRS validation for us, or industry, or responders, what have you. So that's what this is about. All right, so GRS validation and visualization using drones. We're going to talk about data collection, the processing we do, and how we archive it and visualize it. So there's a lot to that. Okay, so there's a lot of steps to this, and I won't go into great detail, but one of the things that we really need to do is, if we're going to fly drone, I mean, drones are cool and they can take great pictures, they can do video and imagery, but geolocating that imagery and overlaying that on a satellite imagery that you might find on Google Maps, that's next level stuff, and that requires some technical expertise. And then archiving that work and sending it off to NOAA's Arctic IRMA team and getting that into their system, this all requires bandwidth and technical capability. And so what we're doing here is taking the drone imagery and processing that with commercial off-the-shelf drones and technology, video and camera technology, and flying the coastline of Alaska. Then we take that imagery, overlay it on a GRS, analyze the changes, and then suggest updates to the existing GRS with our new imagery using what's called the Collector app, which is a tool from, an application that is owned and run by Esri. Esri is the GIS system of record for, I think, the world, but certainly for the United States. And so Esri is a company that owns ArcGIS, and ArcGIS is how we collect data in the field and bring it into a digitized layer that we can go online to look up, and collecting field data to update those layers is done by the Collector app, which is something that the Esri company has. So this is kind of where it gets complicated, and I apologize if it does. But basically what we're talking about, these two folks pictured here, flying drones, taking imagery, processing that imagery, comparing it to old imagery, overlaying the two, and then geolocating them, making suggested edits to the GRS, and then putting that through the approval process, and then eventually to Arctic Irma for visualization during a spill response. So that's what I'm going to talk about. How do we do that data collection? We send teams into the field, which is not cheap, but we can do a lot with drones where we're not renting vehicles. We're flying into Nome. We're staying in Nome for a week with this team of folks, and they're flying the coastline, right? And they're doing analysis on GRSs along that coastline. And we are working beyond line of sight as well. We're not quite there yet, but we know eventually we'll be able to fly drones beyond line of sight to do this work for us, which is going to be the key to getting all the GRSs in the state validated within, the next 5 years. So this is a team we deployed to Kodiak a couple years ago. We just had a team in Nome. So the team in Nome was there in late August, and they were just in the middle of processing all that data, and then Typhoon Merbok hit. So I apologize that you're not going to see all the Nome data here, just some of the Nome data here. But this picture was the team in Kodiak 2 years ago. The team in Nome, like I said, was just there. And so we work with UAF, the Coast Guard, our agency, obviously NOAA and DEC, and we take all these spill scientists and professionals and send them out to fly and to get this analysis for us. And how do we do that? What are we flying? Well, the Skydio is the drone of choice right now. Commercial technology, off the shelf, easy to buy, easy to operate, deployable, not Chinese made. That's an important part of it. And making sure that we've got solid technology that's easy to access and easy for government to manage. So if you're a drone nerd, this is super cool. I'm not, so I'm gonna fly by this, but those are the types of drones we're flying. Okay, so what we're doing is, if you'll see here on the left, is a typical rendering from Google Maps of a given, it's not important where this is, which is me covering for the fact that I don't know where it is. So I apologize for that. But just to show you what we're doing, you'll see the green on the left, and then the resolution is low. And then you'll see this patch of lighter green. And when you zoom in on that, you get the drone footage, which is geographically synced with the Google imagery on the left. So as we walk across from left to right, a Google image where we have overlaid the drone imagery and geolocated it with the Google map. This middle image is us zooming in on that drone imagery just enough so you can kind of see the edge of it, and you can see the change in resolution between the drone imagery and the typical satellite imagery that Google Maps will display for you, or Google Earth. And you can see the resolution between the two is stunningly different, right? So we get high resolution imagery from drones that is way, way better and way more usable for us in spill response and GRS management than using Google Earth, which is essentially what they use to create the GRSs in the first place. And then the last image on the right, all the way to the right, is zoomed in even more, but on the Google Maps portion, which just to show you like very low resolution compared to the drone imagery. Okay. So how does this support GRS validation? So here's a screenshot of Arctic Irma, and Irma stands for Environmental Response Management Application. I knew it. Application. Should have known that. Okay. So Irma, so you'll see on the left is a typical NOAA GIS image shot of a given geographic response strategy. So you see here, and again, where this is isn't important. I do have some Nome stuff, so just bear with me. Some Bering Strait stuff, so bear with me here. But we've got, again, on the left in the red box is a given geographic area, and you can see that it's low resolution, probably brought in from satellite imagery that Google uses, that are NOAA imported here. And so in a typical GIS system, you'll see the image on the left of the screenshot, and then on the right is the data you can toggle on and off. And right now there's a very old and not updated GRS layer that we can toggle on and off. So that's the NOAA Arctic Irma current imagery right here. On the right, you'll see what we're talking about with drone imagery and how much better resolution we get of the same area. And bringing that in allows us to see the change. And you can see it here in that image. You can see that the world has changed from the satellite imagery that was probably taken in, who knows, 2012 to the drone imagery we get that we got, last week or a year ago in Kodiak. So the idea here is to give us better imagery, more recent imagery, higher resolution imagery that allows us to better plan for spill response. And in a emergent scene or incident, I don't want to spend a lot of time with guys who own a boat that are going to pull boom for me to try to keep oil from getting, into places we don't want it. I want to give them something where they're like, and look at it and say, oh, you need 1,000 foot of boom here, and have what they see on a map or chart be accurate to what they're going to go out and drive on a boat. So it's important to us, if GRSs are going to work the way they're designed, is that we can look up an area, hit print or send, and get these maps and the GRSs to folks who know the area and can do the work quickly without having to try to interpret or read, or envision what we're talking about. We want to be very clear, and having good high resolution imagery is the best possible way we can do that. Okay, data collection. So what are we really talking about? We talked a lot about the imagery and the resolution needs we have, but let's talk about the GRSs themselves. And again, I have GNOME data, just bear with me here because of we're using Kodiak as an example. So on the left, you'll see Kodiak GRSs for I think is the northern part. Yes, the drivable part of Kodiak is where we went in 2021 to do GRS validation with drones. And you'll see in every one of these boxes is a GRS, and all of the yellow points here are things we want to do, whether they're collection points or boom deflection or boom collection or inflatable inflatable dams, so we could literally stop the flow of or make collection ponds. All of these red boxes represent areas where we need to work, and we need to potentially do tactics to try to prevent oil from getting places we don't want it. Okay, so you'll see all this, and then we can zoom in. So the image on the right is a zoomed in area of the airport in Kodiak. And you can see there that we have several places where we're going to do deflection booming or collection booming or skimming. And we want to be able to do the visualization, overlay the high resolution data, and then move those tactics where we think better support spill response. So and I'll have specific examples of that here in a second. So just to be clear, what this data collection allows us to do, not only are we flying drones to get high resolution imagery to update our GRSs, but we're going to use the collector app that allows us to make changes of the geolocated GRSs and make changes of the tactics based on the updated visual imagery from the drones. And we can do all that digitally on site and do it with drones, so it extends our reach. And then all of that is done in the field. And so folks back, in Anchorage can pull that information down, analyze it, and start running it through that approval process. And once it's approved, then that updated GRS will go live for people to see it. And that's the name of the game here, is trying to get, again, updated high resolution imagery that helps us build the best possible tactics and update the tactics that already exist in ways that reflect the new coastline or the new realities of each geographic response strategy. Okay, so how are we going to do that? This is, it looks more complicated than it is. So starting on the left, we hire a company or in this case, an education institution, University of Alaska Fairbanks. The International Arctic Research Center has some drone capabilities and GIS analysts. We hire them to go fly the coastline of Nome, or the Norton Sound, the entire Norton Sound GRS suite, right? Okay, so they fly drones, they're collecting a ton of data, a ton of geolocated imagery, right? And so they're collecting a ton of geolocated imagery, and that imagery is essentially government owned data at this point. So we need to bring it in, analyze it, process it, store it, visualize it for end users. How do we do that? Well, that's the hard part. And that's the part that takes time and it takes money. But we also know that once we do this for all the GRSs in the state, it's going to go easier and it's going to get cheaper every time. And the better data we have, the less time we have to spend updating that data. So we collect the data and we process it through the state of Alaska and NOAA. So first of all, we're going to go up to the state of Alaska. State of Alaska is going to archive this for us. And there's an open data geo portal. And again, the technical aspect of that is super beyond me, but there are petabytes of data at servers in Alaska in the University of Fairbanks. And they've already agreed to store a lot of our data as we collect it, because high resolution imagery takes a lot of data. So we're using a geoportal, an open geoportal there to upload all the data we collect there that is managed by the state on state servers, that is accessible by federal partners. All right, so the data gets managed, goes through the state, gets put into an archive, and then once that analysis takes place, whether it's a GIS analyst for Coast Guard or University of Fairbanks, they take that data and they input it into the archives, and then they add it to the existing GRS database as a draft layer, right? So there's the existing layer that everybody can see, which is not great. And then there's the proposed updates, whether we're in Kodiak or Nome, collecting data and proposing updates. In that portal, we'll be able to keep the two, one to the public, one behind the scenes. But once the one behind the scenes is updated and approved by on-scenes coordinators, then that will become the new updated layer that everybody will be able to see. And once that's approved, then Arctic IRMA will import that through NOAA's, highly technical, beyond me processes, but eventually everybody will be able to see it. So the idea here is if I know of a spill that's happened in Nome, then we can go on and pull the latest data on this GIS layer and either show it to folks in Nome, print it out and email it to them, or give them the link to look it up on their device in the field and show it to the boat captain to start pulling boom. So that's the name of the game here. Modernizing this using the latest possible technology, all commercially off the shelf, but making sure that the data is archived and stored properly by government, because it's a government managed program. So what's next? Again, integrating all of the drone data, which are that the visualization data is called orthomosaics, and they're just a bunch of pictures that are essentially mosaic images right, of a certain area, and then blend it together to make it look like somebody just took one giant picture. So that's the idea, is the drones fly, we pull that imagery, it's high resolution, we put it into the collector app, we overlay it with the old GRS data, we make updates based on that new imagery. Those updates go into an Arctic or into the Alaska run servers. GIS analysts working with the government make proposed changes. We run it through and get it approved by the on-scene coordinators, and then the on-scene coordinators say yes or no. And then if it's yes, it goes to Arctic Irma and it gets displayed for the end user. We hope to have this done in 2022, but like I said, it's probably not going to be until early next year. So that's that. And like I said, this presentation was produced, put together by Dr. Guerin on our behalf. And she works with a lot of great people, and we're super proud of our relationship. And again, this is all new. Nobody's doing this in the country. We're creating the checklist. We're creating the protocols to use drones to update and manage fully digitized GRSs. Okay, I've just got a few more slides and I'm going to wrap up, Gay. So I'm giving you the 5-minute warning here. Okay, so I talked about that. Again, just kind of what are we doing? We're trying to get situational awareness. We're trying to get better imagery of hard to reach places across the state, so we can update our geographic response strategies, so we do better incident responses. But the cool thing about this program is it has connections to our facility inspection program. So right now we have facility inspectors that go to each of these hub regions and to every village in the state to look at their facilities to ensure that they're meeting compliance requirements. But those same folks are there looking at this community, and we hope to eventually fly drones or have some other organization fly drones around that facility, so we know, are they impacted by climate change? How's their marine header looking? What is river or coastline erosion doing to that facility? And then merging those folks with the spill response specialists that are looking at the GRSs. So if they go to inspect the facility, then that same crew of people knows, oh, there are several GRSs up and down this facility. Why don't we go take a quick look at those and see how they're going? So right now, we go do facility inspections and we don't do any GRS work. We're hoping to integrate those two things. Again, data challenges, they will always be a challenge. It will always be expensive, and government does its level best, but we end up having to hire commercial off-the-shelf systems because we just don't have the bandwidth. And in a resource-constrained environment, we have to find efficiencies. We have to be able to do this. We have to be able to do this in a way that is sustainable and repeatable and benefits the state, but doesn't bankrupt anybody and is within all our individual budgets. And that's a challenge. Let me tell you, that is a challenge. Okay, so this is GNOME. This is I talked to Catherine Berg, who's our scientific support coordinator, and I begged her. I was like, I know you're buried in Typhoon Merbach, but can you please, pull some data from your trip to GNOME last month? And she was gracious enough to do it. So, so this is looking at the GNOME River. The left image is drone imagery. So that whole image on the left is all drone orthomosaics, right? And then on the right is the orthomosaic and the high resolution image dropped on top of satellite imagery you would traditionally see on Google Maps. And again, if you were to, so these are screenshots. So they're not, I'm not in a GIS system, or I would zoom in and show you how great and high resolution it is compared to the Google satellite imagery. But what, and I say Google satellite imagery, I don't mean it's done by Google. I mean, just generic satellite imagery. Apologize for that. But just so you can see like what the drone data and imagery does for us, and how the changes from the old satellite imagery can really help us better plan for spill response and tactical spill actions. Here's another GNOME specific example. So okay, how did she explain this to me? Okay, so Catherine, I really appreciate you doing this for me. So on the left is the old GRS data uploaded into the collector app. And so in Nome last month, when they were flying the drone, they pulled up the old GRSs and the satellite imagery, and they're like, oh, okay, so we have deflection and diversion booming here. We've got a collection point or exclusion booming. So we want to put exclusion booming here. They're like, okay, we're going to do some offshore skimming here, maybe. Okay, well, that's great. But again, remember, this imagery is old. So then we fly a drone over that same area, and this is what we see. So we see zoomed in, high resolution, where you can see more color, more brighter color, but you can see the area has changed quite a bit. And let me make sure, okay. And you can see that our tactics are gonna have to change based on this imagery. We're not gonna be able, we might wanna look at the sandbar and move this diversion booming somewhere else. It looks like there might be a bit of a stronger current here. So maybe we take diversion booming here. It looks like this was a lot smaller mouth to the coastline than exists today. So I'm not sure I want to put 1,000 foot of boom or whatever this length is here, because it's going to get swept away, or the oil is going to get entrained and just end up going underneath the boom itself. So just this quick example, you can see that the high resolution drone imagery helps us modernize and update these tactics based on the changes of the coastline. But also this innovation in tech, we can use our own devices, and we don't even have to have the internet. We can download the entire GIS file to a device and do all the manipulation of the tactics based on this new imagery right there on the fly. And then when we're back to a place that's got bandwidth, hit upload, and then it goes, like I showed you in that last graph, to the servers with the Geospatial Institute, and then it resides there until our GIS analysts access it to ensure accuracy, get approval from the on-scene coordinators, and push it out to Arctic Irma. Okay, I have been talking solid for, hour, 15 minutes, Gay. That's all I got. I want to thank you for letting me speak this long. And I also really appreciate everyone's attention today. And if you have questions about area committee work or anything I've talked about, Gay has, please reach out to
ask.
Yes, Gay is the person to ask, because she knows how to get a hold of me. But also the ADEC website on oil spill planning and response is really, really good and has a lot of information. So I really want people to go there and check it out if they have time or an interest. Other than that, thank you, Gay. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. Was a lot of information, so I'm taking it all in and I'm wrapping my head around some of this. But this is now the time for the speakers to give Commander Altendorf a little love in the chat box for giving us such a thorough overview of the response system. So while you're doing that, unless there's a burning question, I'm sort of going to review, see if I got it right. So if we want a area that needs protecting in the Bering Strait, we want to make sure there's a geographic response strategy. And then to do that, we need to be involved in the area committee at the local level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the end product is there's a contingency plan that Coast Guard or whoever they're going to send to clean up from a cracked up ship or something, that you guys can use. So and you have a contingency plan. Do I have that right?
Ish. So I would
Okay.
like reorder things just a little bit. So
all right,
there exists several GRSs in your area, and the website I have on this page right now, you could go right there and find Norton Sound and find all of the Nome adjacent GRSs that exist right now. Not very many of them have been validated in the last decade. So they're probably not great, but they're better than nothing. If there's an active spill in the area, I would still go to these and use them as a first response tool to get moving on protecting your area or whatever area specific is being threatened by a spill. And then that is a first responder action that we'd want people to do immediately. And then while that's happening, we could advise you using the area contingency plan on who to call, what else you could possibly do. But in the interim, when there's not a spill going on, we would love updates to the GRSs themselves. If, you know, a stream mouth has moved, you know, a mile south, or you know how this coast, you know how your coastline changes pretty regularly. So those are the kinds of things. And, you know, when there's not a spill going on, how can people participate? Attend the area committees, help us make the plan better, and take a look at the GRSs and see if we've got something just vastly wrong or that needs to be definitely updated. We would definitely appreciate that.
And then we've got Rob's question in the chat box. And I guess first I would ask, how many for the Bering Strait region, or for like St. Lawrence Island, since you were on St. Lawrence Island, how many geographic response strategies, or GRSs, are there roughly? I mean, I would think the whole island. I don't know how you'd pick a place.
I will be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
But I've got the website up right now, and you can kind of see.
So it looks like there's maybe 20.
Yep. 23. No, 20. You're right. Yep.
Just a good guess. But so on that, if you had something happen in between those areas, it was still an important area.
Right. I mean, this is not so we can't, this is the challenge we face is where these GRSs are designed to protect a thing, or protect a wildlife, or protect a certain water body, or to keep oil from moving inland, or damaging something pristine, or keeping a subsistence area, you know, pristine. But they're not an end all be all solution. Okay. And you can't boom coastline, you know, just because you want to protect it all. It doesn't work that way. So we're trying to triage the initial response as best we can with these GRSs. Right.
That's helpful. And Rob Kaler's question in the chat, isn't there high resolution satellite imagery that the US Coast Guard can request to declassify versus funding drone missions?
No, not that I have. I don't know that I have access to. There's not a lot of commercially available high resolution satellite imagery out there of Alaska, for all the reasons that we all know. It's just not, like if you were to zoom in on Google Maps or Google Earth, there are certain areas that have high resolution, and we definitely try to use those where we can, but those are only updated every few years or every 10 years. And so we want better imagery of the GRSs, and we think drones are the way to go, because we can send them out. Hopefully we'll get to beyond line of sight, and so we'll have a greater reach. But accessing satellite imagery for this very purpose would be cost prohibitive, and I don't know of anything that I could request to declassify for this purpose.
Yeah, so I work for the federal government to declassify the GOI satellite imagery, and that's spy satellites, basically sub-resolution. Yeah. So we've done that for habitat for birds. But okay. Just
if you have a recommended process or a point of contact, man, I'll take it.
You bet. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And Marilyn, thanks, Rob. And Marilyn Myers writes, seems like taking the photos at the same tidal level would be important. Other sites may look more different than it actually is. Is that?
Yeah, so tidally influenced waters are an important part of this. Like I said, it's we just want to be able to have better data than, so the GRSs have this very static imagery with it that exists right now, and we're trying to make that better. And once we digitize it, we can bring in layers like what Rob was talking about. If we can get access to that, then we can bring in that layer, and maybe we don't have to do all the drone work and, you know, in Southern Norton, you know, Sound. There's lots of possibilities, but there's no possibilities as long as they remain analog. If I can get them digitized, then we can bring in whatever imagery we can find and layer them on top of the GRS tactics themselves and try to make this better for responders. And that's the name of the game. So thank you, everyone. This is a great point.
And Orlin, I think you changed from phone to internet, but I just wanted to make sure if you had any questions specific on Commander Altendorf's presentation, because my cardinal rule was broken, and that is always go to the caller, but I can see that you've changed from a caller, I think. I'm not sure. You have any questions? Well, maybe he's. Are you on mute? My question, Commander Altendorf, would be, we had a group come several years ago called Shore Zone, and they came and flew every inch of the coast with a camera, and don't know what they were all doing, but I think it was somehow related to spill response. Are those images available to you, or or is that the wrong format or something?
I don't know. I've never heard of Shore Zone, so that's one of the things that's kind of a bummer, is that we don't always either have access. We either don't know about stuff, or people want to make us pay lots of money for access to that data. But I would be willing to reach out if you have contacts for those folks. I'd be willing to reach out and see if we can't, you know.
Okay, I think they were with the NUCA people.
They might have. What year was this?
Does anyone remember when the helicopters were flying and taking all those images? I mean, they flew the entire coast of Alaska. It was a several-year project, and they went and like completely took photographs and video imagery of Bering Strait region.
I'm betting it's available in a GIS layer of some kind.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll try to make a note here.
Okay.
Megan, I see your hand is up. Go for it.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I just had a quick question about other uses of this drone imagery. I mean, I know you said that there would be a publicly available version eventually, but I was just curious if you had some ideas about what other uses might be, or if you've heard from other agencies or other folks who might, I don't know, want access to this type of higher resolution imagery.
So one of the things that, great question. We actually, Dr. Guerin and this team actually flew post-Merbach in several parts of the state. She wasn't able to fly in Nome, unfortunately, but we did get some shoreline assessment work done by her. And I think FEMA is looking at continuing that work. I don't know. But when it comes to like what could be done or what other uses this could have, certainly for pre-storm assessment and comparison, right, of pre-storm, post-storm, those kinds of things are really important for folks. And so I see this incredibly valuable. And the beauty of putting this in Arctic Irma and archiving it under state in the state servers is that it is available to folks as a layer. So they know the GRS layer is there. They can see their orthomosaic imagery, but they can add boundary, jurisdiction boundaries or sensitive site data or other bathymetric, the possibilities are endless when it comes to, toggling data off on these layers. So I think getting into that system expands the possibilities here, and it leverages, it's a two-way street. People can leverage the data we're collecting, but also we can leverage the data they're collecting. Thank you for the shower zone links. I really appreciate it. By the way, I'm going to make sure our teams have this, and hopefully we can get an idea of what that looks like.
And Megan, did you get the answer you wanted or needed or?
Yeah, that's great. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Jim Dory writes, when I was with the Alaska Coastal Management Plan with the city of Nome, there was an effort to map all of the coast of Alaska. And by the time the state withdrew from the program, I know they had substantially mapped south of us. No idea how that turned out. And I can't remember the name of the program or group doing it, but it was several years ago. I think it might have been Shore Zone.
Yeah, I think so too.
If that link, Jim, try that. It's like the Shore Zone and then the NOAA fisheries, how they kind of are wrapped into that.
So I'm going to ask my folks at NOAA to see if this is integrated into Arctic Irma. I'm willing to bet that it is, because this is a NOAA fisheries program. NOAA is a great agency, and they've got data management down. So yes, I appreciate this, knowing about this, and we will work and see if this can help us in our efforts.
Yeah, maybe it'll be the kind of thing that it'll help out.
Yep.
Any other questions for Commander Altendorf before I ask my transboundary Russian question? Okay, here it is. So in the beginning, I was learning too, the National Response Center is the big responders. Then there's the Alaska Regional Response Team.
Nope.
For us, for Alaska.
Yep.
Okay, and they're the keepers of, then it goes into somehow all these different regions, and then the keepers of the contingency plans, and then the strategies, and then this important stuff, knowing how to tell all the people that are going to come to clean up and help us. Help us. Are we doing anything in the response world? We're really grateful. You know, as a Bering Strait resident, you know that there's the red phone in Juneau, just in case there's emergencies that involve this little narrow shared waterway. Are the Russians at all invited, or do they have a spill response, or do they know to tap in? And
so let me
I just don't know where we are on that. That's a huge question always.
It is. And so there's an international component, what's called the Joint Contingency Plan. It's not something I talked about here, but so to step back a little bit about your question. So the spill response decisions during a spill and preparedness for a spill begin and end with the federal and state on-scene coordinators. So they're where decisions are made. They're who run and co-chair the area committees. They're the ones that approve the GRSs, and everybody above them is in a support role. So the Alaska Regional Response Team helps make decisions, helps bring in resources, might make a decision on dispersant use if it comes to that. But the Alaska Regional Response Team is a supportive role to the on-scene coordinator. The National Response Team, they manage technical issues, policy issues, and a lot of times we might go to them for, hey, we want to add intentional wellhead ignition to our plan. What do you think of that? And then they'll talk to their lawyers, and EPA and Coast Guard will go back and forth, and they'll write a nice memo, and that'll go to the RRT. And then the RRT will say, well, this is great. Our on-scene coordinators should know. And so they push that down to the on-scene coordinators. So again, the on-scene coordinators are where spill response decisions and decision-making happens. To your question about the international piece, when I was at Sector San Diego, we worked with the Mexican Navy on the joint contingency plan for the Western Pacific coastline. In Juneau, there's the joint contingency plan with Canada and with Russia. And usually every other year, it's been a little difficult this year, but generally speaking, every year, Russians either come here or we go there and talk spill response. So under the joint contingency plan that is run by District 17, that's how we communicate with Russia. And what I saw in Mexico and what I saw in Russia is when it comes to spill response, and Canada is the same way. When it comes to spill response, politics are usually not, I mean, it's always there. And we always have the State Department helping us out. But generally speaking, when it comes to spill response, everybody's working together. And we're talking, and we have a joint contingency plan that we work through and exercise at a high level. And with the Canadians, it's really good. With the Russians, it is continuous and is dynamic given the state of politics.
Right. But at least there is such a thing, and it's somewhat comforting to hear that if we have a situation that's either in US waters or both Russian waters, that maybe the politics will be laid down a little bit and we'll get to what we need to do, and that's protect the marine resources for people and protect people.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so that's a nice note. Thank you.
You're welcome.
With that, any other questions? And it looks like I may have been giving you guys some feedback. Sorry about that. Don't know, like some buzzing sound. So sorry about that. So for another round of applause there for Jerome Altendorf. So we really appreciate you taking your time tonight after hours to give us all this good information.
You bet. You bet.
Next.
I had a quick question about
Oh,
nuclear.
go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, if there's nuclear vessels traveling up and down the Bering Strait, is the Coast Guard responsible? I mean, we're talking about contaminants versus oil, but contaminants are contaminants. Is there a similar contingency plan? And I know that's kind of a big question, but
yeah,
you can just nod and say, yeah, we've got that under control.
So yes, radionuclides are considered a hazardous substance that we could technically respond to under the National Contingency Plan, which is the regulating document that we build all of this from, that gives authority to the state and federal on-scene coordinators, right? So, however, radionuclides that are part of a international military presence or part of a military vessel would be a different sort of beings. Would we have a response? Would the Coast Guard take interest in that? Absolutely. But unless that vessel is got a port of call in the United States, our regulatory hook isn't there any more than a tanker or LNG tanker running up and down the Bering Strait. Like they have freedom of movement in the high seas, and that is part of that. But we're aware. We maintain a very strong situational awareness of this part of the world, and I can't speak for District 17 because they handle a lot of that stuff. But we are prepared for those kinds of things.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for that question, Rob, because that is a thing. We do have non-military nuclear icebreakers. We have nuclear cargo ships, and we have floating nuclear power plants. We have one in Pevek, just off the coast from Incheon and on the northwestern coast of the Chukotka Peninsula. And I think there's an order currently to have 4 more join that in the vicinity. So
we work closely with the International Maritime Organization on a lot of the international vessel rules. And so I really, it's not my set of expertise, but I work with a lot of the inspectors and the vessel regulatory folks, and they speak highly of their international maritime environment, and that sailors around the globe are following a pretty well-established set of rules. Those rules increase if those vessels have an American port of call. And that's how we really, like with Crowley and those vessels, if they're coming in, they're delivering goods from Seattle to Anchorage, like they have to follow all of the port state or all the domestic vessel rules. If they collect in Kotzebue, Red Dog Mine, if they're collecting, the mining stuff out of, sorry, been talking too much. Yeah. So if they're collecting freight, foreign freight, We have port state rules where we go and look at every vessel to make sure they're following all the safety of life at sea rules and all the what we call SOPEP, spilled oil prevention rules. And so there's a lot of work in the maritime world to prevent spills, to ensure people are being safe. And we have a great deal of situational awareness. So I think everybody's aware of the sensitivity of that area and the transit that goes on there. So we're prepared in many ways. We also know it's preparedness and prevention is one thing. Everything we do in a response capacity will be difficult, and everybody's well aware of that. So for what that's worth.
Well, Bering Strait region is the high risk area because we are tiny little narrows with
Right.
a lot of current and difficult weather. So, and now large vessels into the winter,
Mhm.
honestly, and early in the spring. So thank you very much for bringing this topic to our attention. With that, next Thursday's Strait Science presentation, so that will be October 6th already, is going to be Ken Tape. And he sent us a picture of him with a man with a Hawaiian shirt and a mandolin. And he is going to be talking to us about the westward and northern movement of beavers through the Arctic and how they're re-engineering the Arctic. So it should be rather, I have a lot of curiosity on this one, and it should be fairly interesting. So not as maybe pertaining to our marine environment as much as Commander Altendorf tonight, but we will look forward to that on the 6th. And we again appreciate you taking so much time to give us this good education and update on what's going on.
You bet, Gay.
Actually,
thanks. Yeah, thanks
good.
for the invite and letting me ramble.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I appreciate it. Have a
All
great
right.
night, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much. Yep. We'll see you next week.